This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather and Connie Chung.
Good evening. At the O.J. Simpson murder trial today, lawyers for the people presented evidence that Simpson was a repeated wife-beater who once threatened to kill the woman he now stands accused of killing, his former wife, Nicole Brown. It was the first day of testimony in the trial, and it began with something unheard of in a California courtroom. Correspondent Bill Whitaker is in Los Angeles covering the O.J. Simpson case.
The first witnesses were put on hold for 10 minutes while prosecutors used their unprecedented reopening remarks to rip into the defense's most startling witness. Marcia Clark told jurors that Mary Ann Gerchis, whom the defense claims saw 4 men running from the murder scene, earlier had told a friend she was nowhere nearby.
The evidence will show that Mary Ann Gerchis is a known liar and a Simpson case groupie.
Then finally, the first prosecution witness. Sharon Gilbert, the police operator who answered the first of those infamous 911 calls. This one from the Simpson residence early New Year's Day, 1989. Prosecutors played the tape for the jurors, which they say is Nicole screaming. Gilbert said she immediately dispatched police.
I could, in remembering the call, I could determine after the first scream, then I heard someone being hit.
Then the second witness, the LAPD officer who responded to the call and found Nicole Brown Simpson cowering in the bushes, half naked, battered and bruised.
She was wet. She was shivering. She was cold. I could feel her bones, and she was real cold. She said he's gonna kill me. I said, well, who is going to kill you? She said, O.J.
With the jury paying rapt attention, prosecutors showed pictures of Nicole's injuries that night: a cut lip, a bruised forehead and cheek, a swollen eye. Then Edwards told Prosecutor Darden there was other information Nicole told him that was not in his report.
She told me why the argument had occurred that night.
What did she tell you?
She said that there was 2 other women living in the house, and that O.J. Simpson had sex with one of them prior to going to bed that night with her.
Next, Detective Mike Farrell took the stand, the investigator who talked to O.J. and wrote the official report.
He explained that it was a result of an argument that they'd gotten into that resulted in a physical altercation, more of a mutual type wrestling match.
Now, this, of course, is the incident to which O.J. Simpson pled no contest and was sentenced to perform community service. In pointed cross-examination, defense attorneys once again accused police of incompetence. Dan?
Bill Whitaker, live in Los Angeles. Thanks, Connie.
Tonight's other top story: President Clinton bypassed Congress and ordered billions of dollars in U.S. loan guarantees to Mexico. Details coming up. Also ahead, parents pulling the plug on their premature baby. Is it mercy or manslaughter? And Europe's water torture. It's beginning to look a lot like Venice after the worst flooding in decades. Mexico will get billions of dollars in U.S. loan guarantees after all, and without the consent of Congress. President Clinton acted by executive order. He did so after growing opposition on Capitol Hill. Opponents ranged from those who called it a bailout for bankers to those who insisted Mexico must do more about illegal immigrants. Correspondent Rita Braver begins our coverage of the president, politics, and pesos.
The 4 top congressional leaders were summoned to an early morning meeting with the president. It followed a flurry of late-night phone calls and meetings, and word from Speaker Newt Gingrich that swift congressional passage of the Mexican loan guarantee package would be impossible. The president told the leaders he had decided to withdraw his controversial legislation and instead exercise his executive authority to commit U.S. funds, and that there would be increased financial support from international institutions. Later, Mr. Clinton said he was acting to head off a crisis.
There are thousands of jobs, billions of dollars of American exports at stake, the potential of an even more serious illegal immigration problem, the spread of financial instability to other countries in our hemisphere.
The president will commit $20 billion of loans and loan guarantees from a special Treasury Department fund that exists to stabilize exchange rates. The administration has also convinced the International Monetary Fund to extend a $17.8 billion credit line to Mexico, and other countries will provide some $10 billion in short-term aid.
Do I know for sure that this action will solve all the problems? I do not. Do I believe it will? I do.
All 4 congressional leaders signed a statement of support, and administration officials insist this is not a presidential cave-in.
This was a critical test of American leadership. It'll be read as that around the world. I think the president has grasped that test today.
But privately, some administration officials are worried that the fact the president had to back away from legislation will be seen as evidence that he lacks clout with Congress. Rita Braver, CBS News at the White House.
The news hit the Capitol like a thunderbolt. The Banking Committee had just begun a hearing on the original plan when the chairman was handed a news flash reporting it dead.
Urgent. It says the Clinton pulls plug on Mexico aid package. President Clinton today abandoned his effort to win.
The hardest job fell to the man sent to speak for the administration.
I was told by one of my colleagues behind me that the president either has spoken or is speaking currently, and since I do not know what he is saying, I'm not in a position to comment on the options.
There was so little support for the president's original plan, only one Democrat even showed up at the hearing start. No wonder, said Republicans.
Support for the original plan simply was not here on either side of the aisle.
I think the bottom line is the president never had a plan.
When a Democrat finally arrived to defend the president, it really turned nasty.
So I'd urge my colleagues to restrain the temptation to take advantage of a political situation here. Temptation. Let me finish.
I don't believe that's necessary.
Senator, I believe the time is mine. Well, I do believe the time is mine.
As chairman, I will say Senator, that I think you're out of line.
I'm not out of line.
Well, I think you are. I think you're wearing a different hat, and I think you better save that hat for another time.
Fireworks aside, there was some Republican support in the beginning for the president's original plan, but when he was unable to rally Democrats to the cause, Republicans headed for the door, leaving the president little choice but going it alone. Bob Schieffer, CBS News at the Capitol.
Way outside Capitol Hill and way beyond the Washington Beltway, Mexico's financial problems have been taking a toll on American business and jobs. It isn't just big banks and it isn't just border states, such as Texas, that are feeling the pinch. Correspondent Scott Pelley has more about just how wide and how deep the impact is.
In a San Antonio mill, the debate over bailouts comes down to this. Mexican customers can't afford the wood they're cutting today.
We had some very strong months last year that were consistently growing. In January, we're going to be about a third off of what our goal for January was.
Whether wood from Texas or TV picture tubes from Illinois, to a Mexican consumer, the price of an American product has shot up almost 50% since the peso's collapse, and orders are down. Last year, Mexico nearly matched Japan as America's second largest trading partner behind Canada. Now, as trade traffic slows, jobs are at stake.
The 40% peso devaluation translates into roughly a 1% decline in Texas non-farm employment. We're talking 70 to 75,000.
No numbers are completely reliable, but nationwide job loss estimates range into the hundreds of thousands. The effect is magnified. The peso crisis cuts two ways.
Because not only are American products suddenly less attractive in Mexico, but Mexican exports to the United States, such things as cars and electronics, are much cheaper here, putting even more pressure on American jobs.
And it's likely to last. While loan guarantees bolstered Mexican markets today, they won't fix the Mexican economy anytime soon.
Indeed, it has helped. The question is, how long, what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month?
Some companies aren't waiting for an answer. Zenith is already marketing tubes to other countries. Many companies and workers who look south for a bright future may wait a long time now to realize their hopes for Mexico. Scott Pelley, CBS News, San Antonio.
In addition to the rally on Mexican markets today, the peso rebounded from record lows following word of the loan guarantees for Mexico. Here at home, market reaction was positive, but more muted.
A North Florida minister and his wife are the latest to experience what can happen to a couple after fertility treatments. The results? Quintuplets, 4 boys and a girl born yesterday prematurely within 2 minutes of each other. They range in weight from just over 3 pounds to under 2 pounds. Today, 3 of them remain in critical condition. The death of a premature baby is at the center of a painful moral and legal dilemma in Lansing, Michigan. The final witness was heard today, and on Thursday, a jury could start deciding the case of a doctor charged with killing his own son. The verdict could have a landmark impact on the rights of parents and their ailing children, as we hear from Jacqueline Adams.
Dr. Gregory Messenger is on trial for manslaughter. He admits that he removed his 1-pound, 11-ounce baby boy from a respirator within minutes of the child's birth.
I can honestly say a piece of my heart died right there. Seeing my son on the respirator.
Dr. Messenger, a dermatologist, says he acted not to kill his 3-month premature son, as Lansing, Michigan's prosecutor contends. He wanted to let nature take its course, having explicitly told the hospital even before the baby was born not to resuscitate.
I felt truly that they were prolonging his death, and I wanted him to know the love and the warmth of his mother's arms.
I'm saying to myself, this baby doesn't even have lungs.
When Tracy Messenger went into premature labor, specialists told her that if the baby arrived at just 25 weeks, he'd have only a 30 to 50% chance of survival and a 90% chance of major complications.
But I said to myself, yes, I want this baby, but do I put what I want before what's best for my baby? And I said, no, I'm going to do what is best for him.
The preemie's doctor, though, testified that Messenger acted too quickly before she could assess the baby's chances.
At the time the baby was taken off of the ventilator, I did not have sufficient information about the baby's condition.
And that, the prosecutor said in his opening argument, is the crux of the case.
We cannot make a decision in isolation. When you hear the testimony, ask yourself, was this information analyzed?
Experts say that while the Messenger case may be unprecedented, the issues it raises are not, especially now that technology can prolong a person's life indefinitely.
The difficulty is that many parents worry, and I think with good reason, that once technology is started, it won't be stopped.
Messenger faces up to 15 years in prison. His case could help clarify exactly who has the last word in treating or not treating a very sick child. Jacqueline Adams, CBS News, Lansing, Michigan.
The U.S. Agriculture Department is finally out today with new proposals for meat and poultry inspection. Now, for the first time, the USDA is proposing that meat and poultry samples be tested under the microscope for harmful bacteria. The current inspection system, look, touch, and smell, is almost a century old. America's governors today wrapped up a 4-day meeting in Washington, debating, among other things, how to end welfare as we know it. And wouldn't you know it, Republicans and Democrats couldn't reach a consensus. But one of the governors already has an encouraging welfare reform plan up and running, as Frank Courier reports in tonight's Eye on America.
For 20 years, half her adult life, Betty Houston collected welfare to support her 6 children.
All I had to do was sit home and wait on the mailman. I didn't have to go to work. You know, I didn't have to do nothing for it.
Today, Betty works full-time for $7 an hour at this furniture factory near Holland, Michigan.
A lot of people say I'm crazy. Why you want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to work? I want to go to work. I want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I want to be able to say I've been to work.
Michigan says its bold new welfare reform already has saved state taxpayers $100 million, and it helped sweep Republican Governor John Engler to a landslide re-election. Engler's success is attracting attention from both Republicans and Democrats, who see Michigan as the welfare reform model for the rest of America.
But we've kind of got a strategy and a plan that we think is working pretty well for us, and more importantly, it's getting people off poverty.
Just look what Michigan is doing. Benefits have been eliminated for all single able-bodied adults without children. Those who are still eligible for welfare are required to work, get job training, or do something productive 20 hours a week. And like Betty Houston, who eventually got off welfare, those who do work can keep the first $200 in monthly earnings without losing welfare benefits.
I think it's good because I think it helps build people's self-esteem.
As a result, Michigan officials say 1 in every 4 people on welfare in the state now works, compared with fewer than 1 in 10 nationwide.
It's kind of infused life into a system that, for many of us, we felt was kind of dead.
While Michigan's reform programs have given thousands of welfare recipients a strong incentive to find and keep jobs, there are many more with chronic health disorders, drug or alcohol abuse, who remain unemployable.
And for the social contract to succeed in areas like Detroit's inner city, there must be jobs available to people with no skills at all.
Some people figure that they got to make more than $5 or $6 an hour, you know. Some are fortunate too, but if you don't have the education or any type of skills, you can't do no better.
Critics challenge Michigan's claim that 25% of welfare people are finding jobs. Among able-bodied adults, studies show only 5% actually keep jobs. But Gerald Miller, the architect of Michigan's reforms, insists the welfare culture is beginning to change.
There is a cycle of poverty. There is a crisis of dependency that's out there that we have to break. And what we're doing in Michigan is starting to break that.
I save all my check stubs. You know, to me, they're like trophies because I work for those. Those are mine.
While it may not work for everyone, for people like Betty Houston, Michigan's reforms hold the promise of a better life in a state where a job is as much a requirement for staying on welfare as it is the solution to getting off. In Holland, Michigan, Frank Courier for Eye on America.
The earthquake survivors of Kobe, Japan couldn't believe their eyes today. The Japan imperial first couple visited Kobe for the first time since the quake 2 weeks ago. They rarely come into contact with ordinary Japanese, but today they toured shelters and tried to comfort residents who've lost everything. Snow fell as some of Kobe's 270,000 homeless waited to hear if they'd won a lottery for temporary housing.
The Dutch have always lived with fear of flooding. More than half their country is below sea level or protected only by earthen dikes. But even the Dutch are worried about what might happen as soon as tomorrow. More on Holland's threatening disaster from Mark Phillips.
They aren't called the Low Countries for nothing. Holland, where much of the land is reclaimed from the sea, is in danger this evening of having the water claim the land back. Floods which had already killed at least 26 people in Germany, France, and Belgium have moved downstream, and the Dutch river system can't cope. What's worse, the old system of dikes is in danger of giving way. If it does, 600 square miles could be underwater by tomorrow.
De burgemeester van Maastricht verzoekt u dringend uw woning te verlaten. Is gevaar voor overstroming.
With this threat, the Dutch early this morning ordered the largest civilian evacuation in 40 years. More than 140,000 people have been moved to higher ground in an operation that thus far has been a model of emergency response. Not just people, but animals have had to be moved. Just upstream in northern France, the water is still rising as well. Those who haven't been evacuated are being fed by the emergency services. And as the waters have risen, there's been a flood of recrimination too. Blame has been directed at modern agricultural drainage systems which channel water into the rivers, and on urban development, which has made the ground less absorbent. That and record rainfalls have been a recipe for a disaster that may get worse. The waters are expected to crest tomorrow, and the forecast is for more rain. Mark Phillips, CBS News, London.
Among the needy in this country is someone who might surprise you. Do you recognize him? Coming up next, he had a great arm. Now his friends say he could sure use a hand. We end tonight the way we began, with a former athlete who a few years back was one of the biggest stars in his sport. He was known by his initials, and now he's in the fight of his life. But this is a very different man with a very different story, told tonight by correspondent Vicki Mabry.
J.R. Richard was a lanky Louisiana teenager in the late 60s when baseball scouts discovered him.
I really don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm just waiting on a better offer, you know.
That offer came from the Houston Astros. The next decade held stardom for the 6'8", 222-pound right-hander. On the mound, he led the major league in strikeouts. As one of the highest-paid players of his day, earning nearly $1 million a year, he appeared to be headed for a record-breaking career. Baseball great Nolan Ryan said J.R. had one of the toughest pitches he'd ever seen. Players called him intimidating and menacing on the mound. But all of that changed in 1980 when JR suffered a stroke. He never fully recovered. Comeback attempts failed. His arm was gone, his health was shot. 2 bad marriages, 7 estranged children, and lousy investments had taken his money. Eventually, JR lost his house and bounced around from friend to friend.
I would come here early in the morning, and I'd get my 2 or 3 hours and get up and go.
Recently, he hit bottom, living for a while under a Houston overpass, sleeping in a crevice in the rafters. How much money did you lose?
Roughly $6-7 million.
You say that so easily. Is there any pain there?
None at all. That's yesterday. My ideal is for tomorrow, something coming, not something that has gone.
Like other athletes who lose their physical prowess, JR had nothing to fall back on. His stroke made it worse.
After the stroke, he lost some things. He lost his power to say no, and nobody was there to protect him.
Old friends want to protect him. They're establishing a trust fund, afraid that Richard, now a born-again Christian who wants to help the homeless, would give away money needed for his own support.
I'm not sad, I'm not regretful that it happened, because when it happened, it really makes you a stronger person about survival, about life, because the smallest thing has great meaning right now.
Penniless and jobless, Richard spends time now at his church, trying to get his life in order to make this comeback successful. Vicki Mabry, CBS News, Houston.
And that's part of our world tonight. Tomorrow on CBS This Morning, people trying to work their way off welfare.
And Dan and I will see you again tomorrow night. Thank you for joining us, and for all of us at CBS News, good night.
Good night.